about this panel. Nevada Native Artists Speak on Oral History and Art, a conversation with Jean LaMarr and Jack Malotte. Although this conference is not being held in person at University of Nevada, Las Vegas as initially planned, we at SOHA acknowledge that our intended gathering place and home institution are on the ancestral lands of the Southern Paiute people, Nuuvi, and we honor the indigenous people's land that UNLV resides on. And there's a more extensive land acknowledgement statement in the program. To introduce our speakers today, Jean LaMarr was born on the Susanville Indian Rancheria, where she lives today. Artistically, she's worked as a printmaker, muralist, and as a painter, but has worked in a number of other media besides. She went to San Jose City College during the occupation of Alcatraz, and later graduated from the University of California, Berkeley with a BFA. LaMarr became involved with the activism around her during those years, and it significantly influenced her art. She has taught at institutions including San Francisco State University and the Institute of American Indian Art at Santa Fe. Jack Malotte, a Shoshone and Washoe artist and member of the South Fork Band of the Timoke tribe of Western Shoshone Indians, grew up on the Reno Sparks Indian Collie. Malotte is a graduate of the California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland, California. As a graphic artist and illustrator, his political theme conveys contemporary indigenous issues. He uses drawing, painting, and printmaking to convey his feelings about the Indian connection with the earth and sky and how this connection manifests spiritually, physically, and politically. He's best known for his satirical depictions of traditional Indians in modern world, but the majority of his work depicts the arid Great Basin landscape of his ancestors. His work is exhibited widely across the nation and offers a timely reminder of the importance of the natural world and how tenuous is its protection. And our moderator, Fawn Douglas, is an artist, activist, and mother who resides in Las Vegas, Nevada. Indigenous knowledge passed on through storytelling is influential in her work. Her Nuuvi cultural heritage bridges her people's history into contemporary times. Fawn is currently a graduate student at UNLV in the Master of Fine Arts program. And there are further links to more information about each artist's work on page 16 of the program, so please do check that out. And with that, I will hand things over to Fawn, our moderator.
Brian, thank you so much. And I just want to say what an honor it is to have this conversation and to be able to speak to two artists, activists that I admire and definitely look up to. And we did have this conversation, yesterday. We were touching base on what we'd be talking about today. So before we get into the lives and the parallels between these two artists, I just want to pose the question, how important is it to pass on your stories? Because we are here in the Oral History Conference, and how important are these stories and your place in it? Because I feel like these stories are also influencing your work. Did you want to start, Jack?
Stories. The things I hear, the best stories I've heard are coming from my friends who grew up like I did, and they experienced the same kind of things I did. And a lot of my work is things that they've said when I'm hanging out with them on the Reno Reservation or wherever I was. It's just what they came up with, and then it's stuck in my mind, some story they gave about something that happened to them. And it's funny, but it's, some of it's sad, but it's important to know those little things about my friends who, they're not going to be famous. They're not going to, they're not going to have people writing books about them. They're just average Indians doing things. And those are the that's the stories I get from those kind of people, that the things they've gone through and did. And so some of that I went through. So I kind of take those stories, and as well as the old stories, but the newer stories, I kind of enjoy them more, and kind of, it gives me more inspiration, I guess. And that's about it on that.
Thank you, Jack. What about you, Jean?
Um, I think it's important for the stories to be carried on because as a youngster, I didn't know anything about my family at all. I didn't hear any stories. I didn't understand why I was only, me and my sisters were the only Indian kids in school. And we learned about Navajos and Plains Indian. And these stories are so important. There's special stories about our heroes, our leaders in our community. This is the kind of thing that the young people should be learning about rather than George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. They should hear about the stories in their own community first. And we have Peter Lassen was like the bad guy in Susanville, that he couldn't make any money getting gold, but this was a story. He couldn't make any money getting gold, so the community was talking about how he used to take women and made them slaves. He had them all chained up. So that was on one of the murals. So that was a community story that, you know, no one talked about, but the Indian people knew about it. It's like the stories of Donner Party. I mean, we heard all of those stories for years and years, how the Donner Party, they were a bunch of cannibals. And so the Indians were scared at that time. And they passed all this information, passed to other tribes all over the area. They were really afraid of the new settlers coming in. There's so many different stories around our area that require attention by the Historical Society. There's like a hill, what we lived on was a chokecherry hill. And there were stories up there, my mom said they'd go up there and gather chokecherries and they'd see the wagon train coming in and it looked like a big snake. And that's the image I always wanted to paint, but I just have it in my mind. Every time as artists, when people tell us stories, we conjure up the story already. We know what's going on and we visualize it, what's going to happen. So these are kind of things that are really interesting to me. Stories that people don't know what happened in those days, but it kind of it connects everything between the past and the present. Because we have a bunch of little children in our community that they don't know anything about their history. They just have to learn from their teachers, and they don't know anything about the local history. Some of them don't even know what tribe they are. It's sad that continuity is breaking down, and we need to continue that continuity. It was collected before, but it kind of stopped. No one cares. Because nowadays, elders say, oh, I don't know anything. I don't have no history. I don't know anything. And so you start, okay, well, we don't know anything, but when were you born? So they start talking about when they were born and what happened at that time, what was going on. And pretty soon they're telling all these wonderful stories. Just open the floodgates. Things that I couldn't even imagine what they were telling. And then they would tell me little side secrets that they wanted to make sure that the recorder was off. You know, those kind of stories, Jack. Special stories for adults only.
Yeah, I like those stories.
Well, I take the kids over to an elder's during the snow time because you had to tell the stories during the snow. And so she was blind, but she could tell by looking out the window that there was snow going on. So she was telling us all the stories. And then she said, well, I want the kids out of the room when I tell the rest of the story. So we had to have the kids go into the bedroom while she finished her story. So it's the wonderful things that you find us really, really beautiful little thoughts and things you learn from them, how they survived, how they were brave, how they got through situations that, you know, normally we'd be afraid to be in that situation right now when all the cavalry were coming. You know, you can't imagine something like that. We just see stuff on TV, but they really lived it. They really lived that kind of life. And we were talking about the other day how we were always fearful of police or people of authority because that were soldiers or anything like that. We were afraid of them. Had to keep quiet and keep our heads down, don't say anything. You know, that's all from historical trauma that our families went through. So it's just picking up these stories. These stories aren't lost, they're valuable to us. The elders, oh, they're not interesting. I don't have an interest life. But then you start talking about their great grandmother, what she used to do, and you can see the continuity going on, how they did carry on the information, but at the present, people don't think it's important anymore. And so I try to assure the elders, this is so important to us, we're gonna pass this on, and I make sure that they know who will get the information, who has permission to listen to it. Is it just gonna be in their family, kept in their family? These are so important things, and I seem like the elders aren't respected anymore like we used to respect them. It kind of got lost in the shuffle. As we started texting, it got lost. Things got lost.
So it's interesting you bring up the elders, because Jack and I shared this story earlier this week about because we have something in common. When we were younger, we weren't listening to our elders. When I was younger, of course, I grew up here in Las Vegas, and there was a lot of other things to do, and I wasn't as connected to my culture as I am today. So, definitely today I'm listening. I'm listening to, what my elders have to say. I'm listening to, what these stories are. And unfortunately, I'm missing the Pine Nut gathering that's supposed to be this weekend because of COVID. So we're missing that part of the stories. But Jack talked about something about a friend was confiding a story of how their grandfather or grandparents, witnessed these massacres in Nevada. And it was around the time of the Treaty of Ruby Valley of 1846, and how important those stories were, to pass on, because they are a glimpse of that past. Jack, did you want to talk a little bit about those stories or things that have been confided in you and how you use them in your art?
It's just it's a project I kind of got interested in because there was a lot of stories of massacres in Nevada that I didn't know about or never heard about. And then when I put out a call for it, some people they knew had a lot of information, but a lot of the information that I got out here was from people hearing a story from their great grandmother talking about them going south of here in Duckwater and camping out. And she got up to go to the bathroom, and as she walked out, it was kind of a full moon. And as she went out and to go to the bathroom at where they were camping, she saw these white rocks. And she didn't think anything of it until the next day. She went over there and they turned out to be skulls, bones. And she remembers a story talking about being a massacre down there. And that's not too far from here, 30 miles, maybe, I don't know, 40. But those kind of things that came out that I heard about, and these guys, they don't talk to, they just kind of, they're my friends first, so they're able to talk to me and tell these things to me, rather than just some guy who's curious, But it's just something I've been thinking about, because when you only hear about the main massacres, you never hear about the things that went on here. And there's a lot, once I start looking into it, there's a lot of things that went on here. And, and plus, like Susanville, Jean's family, and then my family, there's a lot of history in my family that I have no idea what happened. My grandmother never talked about anything. And that's a big chunk of stories that I'll never hear. And my mom didn't know those stories because my grandmother never told her how she grew up. And it seems that's a whole bunch, it's all lost. That stuff I'll never know. And I've checked on those kind of things just from talking around about massacres with different old people I've talked to, the old elders, the old people, not me, I'm young still. But those kind of people, they didn't have all that information is gone. They don't remember my grandmother. They don't remember, a lot of the information is gone, a lot of that. And so I'm kind of glad I got to hear some things, but not every, when you hang around with a bunch, like I hung around with a bunch of old people that were, when I was in my 30s, I hung out with these old people that talked about this area They're Shoshones and Paiutes, and they have a whole different, their history is way different than ours. I mean, they had to survive a lot of different things than we did. And I'm glad they did, because we wouldn't be here if they didn't make it. But those kind of stories of how they made it. Corbin, a friend of mine, he talked about surviving on ant milk that they got from the anthill. And as a baby, that's what he drank. Or my auntie's talking, my auntie was born down at the river in South Fork. And, you know, she knows where it was and all this. But those kind of stories I like to hear about. The things, the old stories are good to hear, but it's the newer ones I kind of like to, the things you don't read about, we never read about. And so that's my, that's what I've been kind of going towards lately, is doing that kind of storytelling. And I'm trying to do it in a series of them, so I don't know how to present it. I was going to do it as an Indian guy driving on the highway with these highway signs you see out here. They're Nevada historical signs. They're in the shape of Nevada. And they tell a little story about wherever you are. And that's what I wanted to do in different places as you drive around Nevada. Different places I would like to put up signs saying those kind of things. A massacre happened here, blah, 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 and, you know, because you don't see that anywhere else. You see about mining town was raised here, 2 white people were killed, so it's a massacre, and, you know, that kind of stuff. So I've been, that's my aim lately, is to do that kind of, to bring that out. Is that a good one, Jean?
Blood and guts. Go for it, Jack.
Yeah, I love that. It's easy to draw too, because I got a lot of red, you know. Because I used, on one of these things, I used a lot of red. I painted the whole thing red first, and then I kind of been adding things on top of it, but it starts out red. I'm working on things still.
That's good. I'm glad that
those are the stories I like to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I like this. Say what?
Oh, sorry. It was breaking up a little.
But I like.
I said it was breaking up slightly, but you're okay. But I really love hearing those stories, and I think those stories are really important. And I know it's something I definitely want to continue on, even past this. You know, I know we only have a small time to share with the viewers for this, but I want to hear about your story, because when I look at the art and your history, both of yours together, you both shared a mural project in 1985, which was Our Ancestors, Our Future, which has 7 figures, you know, throughout time of, you know, figures from the tribes about these important people who did things here in the state of, in this state. And I'm not sure if that's the first time you've met, though, because when we spoke yesterday, Jean was talking about, you know, when she met you, she was tying your shoes, teaching you how to do that. And
so, hold the brush.
Maybe you could tell me a bit about your story.
My story?
Where
was it, Jean? Was that an art? Well, Jean and I met at an art show. I think that she saw my work somewhere and then went to an art show, and then we started talking and got me involved with the California artist people and introduced me around, and that's how I met Jean. She was kind of like the first real artist I met, you know, working person, you know, artist. So she was one of the first ones I met, and that's how we met. I think it was through an art show in Reno. So I'm not sure. Is that true, Jean?
I don't know. You have a better memory than me. You're younger than me.
I think it was at an art show in Reno, and I can't remember. It's so long ago.
Was it for the education? National Indian Education? Ben was running it a long time ago, and we had art all over town. everywhere.
That sounds familiar, because Ben Alec, Ben was, yeah, that was a long time ago. That's when Bert and Pete and I had a group show together. He did his arrows and things, and we had a group show. And then I think you were there, or you met Bert.
Yeah.
I don't know, so long ago. People ask me how I meet people. Yeah, I met her in jail. We're good. They got jail. I don't know. That's a story right there.
We both share a really long history that goes back, you know, about 30 years or more.
Yeah.
And Jean, that you were a mentor to Jack and even helped in hiring him at the Institute of American Indian Arts for printmaking when you were serving some time over there. But I wanted to kind of go over to some of these questions from our panelists, and I think this is a really good one about the stories, and maybe within both of your times of knowing each other or beyond that. But what memories bring you hope and can encourage the generation coming up?
Go ahead, Jen.
You going?
Well, I see all these young people that are so talented, and they're more creative than they used to be. Seems like it was not acceptable for kids to do artwork or have free creative time. That was the bottom of the list. You had to have the math and reading and everything else before art. But the creative part is so important for kids. They learn how to create stuff or problem solve. All this stuff is so important for them, but they have to have pride in there. These kids go to school in our town and they go feel like a second-class citizen. Oh, the teacher's gonna be mad at me. My homework was late. Everything was negative. And I said, no, don't think about that way. We've got to make it positive. And turn it in late. You might get a lower grade. At least turn it in. You're not going to fail the class. I just tell these kids this kind of stuff. It's like they're so talented, but they're so afraid to really venture out and really do something. And I guess they're kind of controlled by their phone and games and all these things that are going on now. And they're not really being creative. I think that they experience that creativity when they come to the rancheria, when they have after school programs, this kind of thing. They're encouraged to do cultural programming, cultural arts. This kind of thing is so important. They get to do beadwork. They never think they can do anything like that. They're so proud of their prints that they make. They come up and show me. They don't want to tell anybody else. This is for my mom, don't tell. You know, it's just, they know they did something very special and that's going to be for their mom, but don't tell anybody. So I have hope for these young people that maybe they will, because just like the lonely people, they were just hidden, they were invisible, but now all these young people I talk to, they're all adults now and they've learned their traditions, their language. They're working on their regalia. They have not federally recognized yet, but they're working on it. And so the hope is for the young people to get in there and do something. And like me and Jack, I think we opened doors. We were like the early people doing this. We're the old ones. He's the old master. And so, opening doors, they said, well, Jack can do it. Look what Jack did. And, wow, he did this mural. I'm proud of the murals that he's done all over. I seen him start out doing small murals. Remember he did a mural about I think you got a commission, 5 foot by 5 foot, something like that, about a jet or something like that. I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
But, it's good that girls can see me doing this kind of thing, but the young boys need it equally because they're so discouraged. When they see something like Jack doing something like this, being on TV or talking on someplace or having a big show somewhere, that's really important to them. It's a contemporary person doing something, not just something, not just a Van Gogh or one of the historical artists. at least we have somebody in history now that has done this. Jack's way older than me, and I look up to him.
Yeah. Yeah, pass you up.
I honor his
You
wisdom.
want me to talk about what? Well, what gives me hope is I think sometimes people aren't really listening to what or watching what I'm doing. And then it surprises me when somebody does something and they said, I've been watching you and you made it look easy, and so they give it a try. When before I never thought they were even paying attention to what I was doing. And when I lived on a Reno reservation down there, I taught a friend how to silkscreen, and he went on and got the job. And then he taught these other guys how to silkscreen, and then they were turning it around. And they were also, I showed a friend how to cut stencils and use an atomizer and make t-shirt designs real easy. And it was kind of neat because I went over to this house and everybody there was doing artwork. They were silk screening as well as doing the stencil work together. And they were all having a good time. They were partying, you know, there's got to be partying around. And they were doing these things. They got excited about it. And I was sitting there because I wasn't around for about 4 or 5 months. And I was sitting there looking at these guys, and they were all excited, and they run out and get a t-shirt someplace and come back and do a design, silkscreen something real fast, and take off and go make some money, and then it keeps the party going, you know. And so people were doing that for days. It was just going on like that. And I was going over and I sat there and I thought, I felt like a proud father, even though they were using the money for partying and drinking it and everything. It was still kind of nice. At least somebody was paying attention. And that made me feel good because they were using what I showed them how to make money off it. And it was so easy, and they just took to it. And it was, so that kind of, it gives me hope when I see stuff when I think people aren't paying attention, but they really are, you know, that kind of stuff. And so it felt kind of good to see those guys making money off it and seeing the value of it, of doing silkscreen or doing these designs, and then realizing how easy it is. You know, there's nothing to that, you know, and it was so easy to make money off of that. They kind of saw the value in it, which was cool, I thought. That's the story I like. Felt like a proud father.
Well, it's a beautiful story of hope, and it's really, really nice to hear about, you know, both of you talking about your art and your life. And Jean, you actually touched on the Ohlone Journey mural that you painted back in 1995, and it's one of those murals that still stands today and assists people in learning about the culture at Berkeley in California, and to tell that story. But we have a question from one of our viewers, Richard Boland, talking specifically about, you know, homelands. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. Can you tell us what role your traditional homelands play in your art? I asked the question because it seems like I would hear the most stories when we were out on the land. The plants, the animals, and landmarks would all prompt our elders to talk about them. So yeah, what kind of role do the lands play in your art? And I'll let you start, Jean.
Oh, okay. Well, it's like we're our land. The land is our mother, and this is where we get the water from, our food from, our nourishment, our shelter. And it's like people don't respect the earth like we do, and we've been trying to put across this information, and the only ones that were accepting it in those days were the hippies. The hippies seemed to like that concept, but the hippie movement kind of went away, and so the respect for land by non-Indian people went south. So it's kind of sad to say, but I think people are starting to realize something's going on here. Why is the sky so orange 24/7? Why doesn't the sun come up anymore? The sky from the Bay Area, the sun hasn't come out for a couple of days. It's like the end of the world. And we better start taking care of this earth, he said. And he's a Jewish guy. He never said that before. I never heard him say anything like that, but hopefully they're starting to think about it. You know, we're breathing a bad air right now. No one has respect for that kind of thing. It's nowadays, what I understand, this organization in Berkeley was telling me that they're going to start selling air above your property. No one can enter your airspace like 10 feet above your house because you own all that. Or you can own all the way up to 1,000 feet above your house, and no one can go by it. No jets, no airplane, no helicopter, no bird. How you can stop that? It's getting too outlandish when you start selling airspace. It's bad enough. Some of the concepts they come up with. How do you deal with that? These people are just so outraged about how these people want to sell air. Sell the stars, sell the moon, sell the sun. I don't understand it, but they can get a concept like that. It's so different than how we were brought up, how we thought about the earth. We had no problems with it at the time. There was nothing. There was no pollution. There was no garbage. We never heard of that word recycling. The only recycling we did was when we went to the rummage sales. We love that. No one has even heard of rummage sales anymore. It's all yard sales now. But so that's, at least they're recycling when they have a yard sale. Well, I said, well, at least they're recycling. How sad.
Yeah.
I went down to the museum down, what was it, Sea World, and they had the whales all locked up. I was sad. I started crying because those whales have to perform, and finally SeaWorld let them go. They said, we're not going to lock them up anymore. So they let the whales go. They shouldn't be in there. And my husband, Spencer, used to say, my friend, non-Indian, she had a tarantula, had snake, and had lizards, and had all kinds of, he said, I don't want you going over there. I said, why? Those animals shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be in the house. They belong outside. They're wild animals. They should be outside, not locked up in somebody's house. And that's right. We have a different concept. We have different concepts in the non-Indian about animals and the earth and how we love trees. It's important to have trees. I don't even grow grass anymore because water is so sacred. It's sacred for my tree. My tree is more important. So this is the kind of thing I'm about. My concerns.
Thank you, Jean. What about you, Jack? What kind of role do your homelands play in your artwork?
Oh, I do a lot of landscape stuff, and I've lived in Nevada most of my life, a few other places, but you know, when you live in a desert, you know how Las Vegas, same way, we live in a desert. We don't have many trees out there to cover things up, you know, like if you see a mine, it's out there, it's just a big scar out on the mountains. There aren't trees to hide it. So when you're out here in the desert, you see all that stuff. It's right in your face. You can see big scars where the mining has been, even in the old days, in the 1800s. You see all those scars, and they're still there to see. And so when you live in the desert, those kind of things stick out to me, because you see the desert out here. It hasn't been touched, but when it has been, there's a real big problem with it because it just sticks out, and it really, it's just like a big scar. And so when I do the drawings, I think of that kind of stuff. And because the landscape has always been the part that keeps me anchored, sort of thing. Because growing up, I've always spent a lot of time outside. My first jobs were outside working Forest Service. And then after that, I didn't get a first inside job until I was like 25, working for the newspaper. So, but the landscape was always my main focus, just being out there hiking a lot and going to places and doing a lot of hiking. I used to do a lot of hiking. But it's just you see it more out here, I think, than you would if you lived in a place where there's a lot of trees. You don't see the damage done. So the water looks clear, but if you look in Nevada, we don't have much water. So if anything gets polluted, that's about, there's nowhere else to go. This is a desert. We got to take what we got and keep it where it's at, because the desert changes everything. It's doesn't take much to change it. Doesn't take much of abuse. Just a little bit of water gone somewhere will dry up springs, and then of course then the animals will leave from that. But the landscape has always been my focus, I guess, and just the way it looks, looking for patterns in it, trees and bushes and rocks and things, and it just you appreciate how the land is, how it folds, how it looks. But when you're in a place where there's a lot of trees, you don't see the houses, you don't see all that stuff. Out here, if there's a house, you see it right away. You know something's going on, and you see the stuff. And so that's how landscape has been with me. And especially, and then working with the elders, the medicine people, that was a main focus, was always the land and keeping us healthy as well as the land. That was like the main focus. So, yeah, so anyway, that's about it on my way I see the land.
Yeah, I also use the land in part of my art as well, and going out in the desert and looking at the petroglyphs and such. And we discussed yesterday about passing on traditions and how important the oral histories are, and how it is to pass on not only like the basket weaving and other traditional arts, but murals are also a part of our tradition. And Jean spoke about this yesterday, about how the petroglyphs, those are murals. Our people have left these stories for us over a number of years of time. Excuse me, Jean, can you speak more about how murals are a part of our history, and how those affect your art and how you present the stories?
Well, I did a lot of studying about petroglyphs and pictographs, all these important things that to me was important, but no one knew what they meant. And because they were by, grandmas talk about, they were way back when the people were old, the old people from a long time ago. That's what they left for us. It would be a little bit of information. Jack seen, when we did that mural up there, there was petroglyphs that he put on the mural. And people said, what are those? What are they? Well, some of them were snake designs. Some of them had just decorative. It seems like it was just a shape, a curve. And where he went was a deer blind, where they would wait for deer, and they would hide out and wait for the deer all evening long when they come to get the water. And they would sit there and draw. I went and looked at it, and some of them are beautiful. One was like a butterfly. They just make really precise. How do they grind through that rock and make this beautiful, intricate butterfly? Could never figure out. And they grind through the top layer of the rock, and it stays like that for thousands and thousands of years. And they were saying like the most oldest petroglyph. And I said, how do they? Well, they do carbon dating, but how can they carbon date a rock? It's supposed to be here in the Great Basin, one of the oldest ones. So at least it told us that we've been here thousands of years. And the other thing, it tells us that we had ancestors, and the ancestors counted how many sheep or talked about a war or a killing or something that happened at that certain spot. I tried to figure out what, doing studies, how people analyzed these on what was happening at that time. A lot of times it was the instant a certain situation happened, so they want to mark that rock as that space, this certain thing happened. Maybe a baby was born there, or maybe a war was going on there. Just something that was important. They wanted to leave that information. So it was like a little newsletter. I would think about this. Oh, they're sending out news to us. And so that's what the murals are for, sharing information. To get information out. It's a pleasant way. Some don't want to read, but they can read a mural with their eyes and find it pleasant. And, people love Jack's, what's so exciting, the movement. He just deals with the air and space and dimension. And Indians really like that kind of thing. They love the Great Basin area because it is desert. And a lot of people say, it's so ugly, how could you stand it? No, we love it. Sorry, we love it. We're used to it. This is what we love. We don't like where you're living at either. But so people said, well, why don't you move if there's no water there and there's no, I don't know, you can't move from your homeland. It's part of you. So we stay where we're at. And one of my friends was saying, why do we have to move to Bear? Why do we have to go to Santa Fe to be an artist? We need to stay in our own home and do what we want to do. He never wanted, that was Brian Tripp. He never wanted to leave his place to do artwork, to show his artwork. They sent him out to New York and he hated it and it didn't do very well. So I don't know what happened. So it's like we belong here and the land belongs to us and we belong to the land. So this is our connection with the land that is so different than everybody else's. And it's like the elders really talked to us about how it used to be, how there was a lot of snow and how they had a lot of big fish in this river. Now they're just little ones and there's nothing and everything is spoiled. And I was talking to Mary and Carrie Dan, and what Carrie was telling me, up that hill from her was the spring. And these were stories, the little people were up there and that they don't camp out at water places because that keeps the animals from those places. If humans there, they won't go there. So they can't camp right next to the water. They have to be a separate space from there, so the animals can live. So they'll have food. So these are special places where the water is at, and people don't respect water here. So the water is polluted and used in a terrible way. I think I've drank so much chlorine because I worked almost every summer here in Reno, and it was really chlorine, really bad in those days. I don't know what it tastes like now. We just drink bottled water, right? But we were lucky to have a couple lakes around us, but the water is drying up and we're not getting any snow. We're not getting any rain. And people are starting to say, well, maybe they ought to, why don't you tell the Indians do a rain dance so we can get some rain? That's kind of insulting kind of thing. Every time there's no water, they say, Indians need to do a rain dance. And people are starting to realize there's no rain and why. The whole world's on fire right now, and people are finally starting to ask why. So these are kind of things that I know Jack is, I know we talk about a lot of these things and we laugh about them, but they're real serious to us. They're real serious situations. And we are teaching our young people about the earth. And what I like about it, the young people are teaching their parents. What they learn in school or learn from me, they go back and tell their parents, and they tell their parents, you need to stop smoking, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't be drinking. And they would tell me all these different things. I'd tell their parents, don't go buy that 6-pack of beer. I didn't want to tell that story, but they would tell their parents not to buy it because Easter was coming up and they wanted to do something special. I don't know what it was. So I'm glad to see that children and younger people are starting to talk to their parents. They've stopped a lot of smoking because of that. That was a push for people to stop smoking. So they addressed the kids, and the kids got after their parents, make them stop smoking. So that was good. And the kids are learning to recycle more than their parents, and their parents telling their parents to recycle. It takes a little effort, it takes time, but once you get doing it, then there's no problem. But they don't recycle here in Nevada. So a lot of people bring all their cans over to California and they get busted. If they accept cans, they get busted. It's so funny. So it's too much.
You mentioned something about, you know, somebody saying like they should do a rain dance. We need to get the rains here. And we're talking about these stereotypes for Native people. And I think that both of you have a lot of knowledge to pass to the youth, you know, about that. I mean, we've had, which is really wonderful that the Washington team has changed its name. I mean, not because it respects Native people, but because of a money issue. You know, people starting to defund it. But this is something or a trend that we need to see everywhere. I mean, we had a conversation before about even the Elko warriors, was it? And, you know, like
Indians.
Yes, yes. And perpetuating these stereotypes, you know, and I think these stereotypes are really harmful, but can either of you speak on, you know, these stereotypes and why we need to push against that image of the Indian?
Well, I think we need to educate our own people first, because I see a lot of people wearing hats that are Redskins or jackets, Redskins, a lot of Indian people, and they're all proud of it, and they wear their hats that, you know, from the baseball teams, the Indians. And I think we got to educate them first. I mean, it's hard to talk about it to somebody else when the Indian guy's standing around with a Redskins jacket on or something. So I think that's where it's got to go first. I mean, it's harder to preach that stuff when their own people are doing the opposite, you know. So that's what I think about that. And the Elko Indian stuff, it's just the high school thing. It's kind of the Indians are proud of the Elko Indians in Elko. They like that name. They're all for it. And I come from Reno. We see things a little different, but yeah, and I open my mouth once in a while about it, but it doesn't seem to make too much. But I guess I'll have to come up with a visual on it or something for this people to pay attention a little bit. So anyway, that's it on that. Jean?
Well, I was going to say that, you know, it's nice to hear the Susanville Warriors, or, you know, and even in our own community, we have our basketball tournaments. We have the Bravettes or the Braves, and the girls are, you know, so they name themselves their own kind of traditional Indian name. That's okay. But the thing, what white people do is they make a mockery, they make a goofy looking Indian, they make a clown and make it look stupid and foolish, like we're nothing but a mascot. But the mascots, they make them hideous and idiots. I don't know. My dad used to tell me, "Come watch this. This is Stanford Indians." I said, "They're Indians? They're real Indians?" "Yeah, they're real Indians." And they had that guy coming out on his horse, and oh my goodness.
Sounds like Elko. Except they had a real Indian.
Yeah, well, they had real Indian at Stanford too, but they found in Stanford they're Cardinals, you know, so that's neutral. But the thing is, they have to make a mockery of it and be silly. We'd be proud of it if they wouldn't do that, but they do. So what can we do? If we allow it, they'll go 150% overboard with it. And you see millions of people sitting around, even Jane Fonda, tomahawk chop. It's have to fight against the whole thing because they can't do it nicely. They have to do it mean. So we have to fight against the whole thing.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
remember me and Spencer doing the tomahawk chop.
Yeah, you guys didn't that.
But you learned. You learned, and you know better now. I mean, of course, like, when I was younger, I had a Redskins shirt, when I was a teenager, and I didn't know any better. But then when I learned about it, and that means, the skin off the scalp, the Indian kill, it's the proof of Indian kill. And I was like, wow, I was really perpetuating that. So it does take some learning. And Jack, I think that was an excellent point about how we have to teach our own people these things first. We have to educate, and we have to share that knowledge. And we do have another question from Ellen, thanking you for this wonderful talk. And she's really interested in how you see cultural appropriation or patronizing in the arts. Like, where do we draw the line between being inspired by Indigenous culture in a respectful way, and when does it start to be disrespectful?
Go ahead, Jean.
Well, you're the elder, so go ahead, do first. You better tell him the question again.
It's a cultural appropriation question. It's basically cultural appreciation versus appropriation. That's the base of the question. Like, where's the line? Where is the line of, like, when people cross that line who are non-native?
Well, I think we talked about at the powwows how we have a good time when we have the Taiwo dance. And they make it out there with their shawls, and they really kick up dust, and it's a lot of fun. The Indians enjoy that, but they're willing to go out there and dance for us, and white guys doing a shawl dance is really silly, especially if they're wearing cowboy boots. But the thing with cultural appropriation, everything's being taken away from us, and everybody's claiming it as theirs. I remember that a group of Asian men came around San Jose and were photographing powwow beadwork, were photographing my artwork. They were photographing. Well, I said, "What are you doing this for?" And he couldn't speak English, so that was the end of that. And so what did they take it? So they've taken it to, for instance, the Pendleton. Everybody, all Indians love Pendletons. So the Asian people came along, they were smart enough to come along and copy that and make it into plastic blankets. All our blankets now are all plastic, Dacron kind of acrylic stuff. And they've copied those designs from Pendleton. Pendleton is mad at them, wants to sue the Chinese company. And the Indians are mad at Pendleton for stealing their designs. Because the Indians, that's my design, that's my backyard design they're doing right here. Now they ripped me off, and they came here and they took it. They had no business taking it. They want to sue Pendleton. Pendleton wants to sue China. So who owns it? You see all these designs all over. It's like a fad. I remember, I can't remember, what was her name? She used to be married to Tony Beta. It's on the tip of my tongue. She's a fashion designer. And so she was in New York on Project Runway. And she just did some really fantastic creative art. I can't remember her name. Patricia Neal. Patricia, I can't, I'm sorry. But she did all this beautiful stuff. But then before you knew it, all the stores were full of Indian designs, Indian shirts, Indian jackets, Indian this, Indian everywhere. And I said, how come Indian people? And the lady that was judging her said, this is too commercial. We don't want this. This is not enough. It's too artsy fartsy. I'll never do that. I don't know what she was saying to her. She kind of kept contradicting herself. So Patricia didn't win. But then you've seen all this Indian art, all this fashions were all Indian in design. Everything was Southwest. The Southwest look was in, everybody was wearing it. not just people in the Southwest, all over. And so I said, so people can steal from each other, no one can claim it. You know, we can't claim it. We can't do nothing about what Pendleton took from us, because if we're out there with our outfits on and are dancing, we're out there in public so they can take a photograph of it and use it any way they want to. And to me, it's wrong. All this stuff is wrong. Give us credit for it, at least. Going to say what's made by Jimmy Choo, you know. It's an Indian design, has nothing to do with Asian designs. Asian designs are beautiful. I love the Asian market and Asian museums, but it's so different than what Indian people are doing. I'm grateful that we do have an Indian museum, in fact, real beautiful Indian museum in New York City now. At least people get an idea the Indians are still alive, and that's what they're trying to, well, let people know about them.
Thank you, Jean. And I'm looking at this, and we're really getting close to time. We have about 2 minutes left. To end it, not end, but we do have a question for Jack. And both of you, maybe you'll speak on this actually. Can you talk a little bit about your portrait of the Dan sisters, of Mary and Carrie, and what did you try to tell about their story through your art with the Dan sisters? And I really love that print because they're two women and they're smiling and they're happy, and it's this portrait of them for the viewers who aren't too familiar, but it's like a portrait of these two, you know, Native women, and they're in this beautiful Shoshone landscape, and there are these, you know, figures, like these triangle figures below them pierced in the grounds. Jack, can you talk about that work?
Well, Mary and Carrie have been friends. I mean, good friends for years. I always liked that smiling pictures of them. So I thought that was appropriate. The triangles and those kind of things, if you look close, they're triangles taken out of the mountains, and that represented mining, taking whole sections of mountains and taking them out. And the whirlwinds I put in there is sort of like the mines taking our heritage out of those mountains by digging up graves and digging up artifacts and just removing them from the land. That's what it's about. But I always try and show those two women as how they were. I mean, you know, like Mary died a while ago, but Carrie, she's still hanging in there. But, you know, she's older now and she's not getting around. She's still cranky as ever, but, you know, that's the way she is.